preseason matchup, always a big one. The Carolina Panthers coming in to take on Joe Flacco and the Ravens. Luke is on the backfields in Owings Mills, but we will also be collectively up late every night for the next week as the Orioles spend a week out in the Bay Area. I am jealous of all of the Oriole fans that are going out there to see Oakland and San Francisco. I already spent my 10 days out in the Bay Area, used up my Bay Area card during the Super Bowl. She has covered the Oakland A's for 2 decades now, and mostly good times, but these are not the good times in the East Bay. She's a longtime A's beat writer since 1999 at the San Francisco Chronicle. She is the defending champion here at WNST. We welcome Susan Slusser back on, and you can follow her journey as well as her sea of A's bobbleheads on Twitter at Susan Slusser. Always a pleasure to have you on. How are things out there? I'm missing this trip. I mean, it's not often I don't get a Bay Area trip out to Yangtze and out to the Richmond District for some tequila, but I'm skipping this one, Susan.
Oh, what a shame. It's beautiful weather, too. You know, this is just the perfect time of year to be here. So, yeah, it should be a fun time you're right, for any Orioles fans that are out for the week.
I told everybody, pack your little, like the October jacket because, like, it is the Bay Area. A lot of folks going out for the first time to see baseball. This is kind of weird spending a week out there, right? This doesn't happen a bunch, does it?
It seems like every year there's one or two teams that wind up doing the sort of overlap between the A's and the Giants, you know, much like occasionally if you get lucky you can do it in New York or Chicago. But, yeah, you're right. Not very often. Dress in layers. That's the key to the Bay Area. Dress in layers.
All right, so the first place Orioles are I haven't had a chance to say that much in 25 years of radio here, Susan. So, but I mean, we're heading out there, and you know, the notion is this is a really bad baseball team. Obviously, the Sonny Gray thing has just been probably the biggest head scratcher for everyone in the organization, including Bean. You've been around all of this, the good, the bad. I mean, even 2 years ago when the Lester deal was supposed to lead them to the promised land, it's been a 24-month bad mark. I mean, maybe the darkest moments of the Bean administration there for the A's, right?
Yeah, I mean, injuries this year and a little bit, you know, to some extent last year have really played a part. But this year, you know, there are 25 guys on the DL. I mean, that's just extraordinary.
That's
that they tied the team record. And yeah, and Sonny Gray goes back on the deal, but he has not been right all year. I don't think that was an injury situation, but the performance has just been baffling, and nobody really has an answer for that. So when you're talking most of your rotation out and then Sonny Gray not performing, there's just no way that you're going to have any sort of shot to contend.
Did you have hope for the team this year? I mean, we're sitting here in Baltimore. Not a lot of people had hope here. We felt like it was going to be a beer league softball team. It is really strange in baseball how these things work out, that years you think they're going to be okay. But I looked at the A's and thought they were challenged in that division all the way around.
Well, I thought they would be certainly better than last year. Last year, by far, the A's biggest problem was their bullpen. The bullpen was dreadful. They led the league in one-run losses. They set a franchise record for one-run losses. You know, it was actually not a bad club. Then they wind up, you know, as they did this year, trading a bunch of guys at the deadline, and they had a bunch of injuries toward the end of the season. But really, the A's issue last year was the bullpen. And had the bullpen been better, maybe they avoid some of those trades and some of the late collapse. So they addressed that. They went out and they add Ryan Madsen on a 3-year deal, John Axford on a 2-year deal. They trade for Mark Zepchinski. The bullpen has been very good. Sean Doolittle's been hurt much of the season, which has impacted it some, but really, you know, when working well and healthy, an excellent bullpen. So I thought, yes, then the defense is better, you know, and they go out and add Rich Hill. So I thought they would be better, but I think they've just been up against it with far too many injuries.
Susan Slusser joining us here from the San Francisco Chronicle. You can follow her out on Twitter at Susan Slusser. That's SLUSSER. You know, I've seen Moneyball, read Moneyball. You know, you've lived Moneyball there with Bean. Is he shocked that it's as bad as it's been? I mean, they always feel like they've walked a tightrope there with finances and players and walks and bullpens and all of the ways you can sort of circumvent giving baseball players $25 million a year to play.
Well, they're realistic. I mean, with a lower payroll, you have less ability to absorb a bad injury or two or a bad decision or two, and they are, you know, they're looking at a couple of those too. Obviously, the Billy Butler thing has not worked out very well, and the Josh Donaldson deal. So far, you know, Kendall Graveman, who was in that deal, is actually turning into a very solid starter. And they've still got a kid shortstop in A-ball who's coming along real well from that deal. But right now that's not looking so great. But the Billy Butler deal kind of has hamstrung them. It's a very expensive roster spot with not a lot of production. Things like that really can hurt a lower payroll team, and they know that. They know their limitations. On the other hand, in an effort to get better this year, they've also made some really good deals. The trades at the last year's deadline wound up with them getting Sean Manaea, who looks like he could be a very good starter for a long time in the league. And they wind up spinning another minor leaguer from that deal into Chris Davis, who's just been sensational. So, again, this is a team that should be better than its record, but, they've really, they certainly have their flaws, but more than anything, it's essentially losing the entire rotation.
Or as we say here, the other Chris Davis, right? We have our $161 million version who's actually being outperformed by yours with the K, right?
Yeah, I mean, between the two of them, if you had two Chris Davises on the team, I think you'd be pretty darn. There was a day about 2 weeks ago where their numbers for the previous calendar year were identical. I mean, it was crazy. Same number of hits, same number of RBIs, same number of homers. They're off a little bit, but man, if you look, it's real close. It's really, really close. It's pretty fantastic.
That makes for a great Sunday note in the old newspaper vernacular now, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I think the key is everybody needs a Chris Davis. Why not?
Oh, of course, yeah. We use an Adam Jones and a Mark Trumbo and anything else we can get our hands on at this point. Shocked that we are talking about the first place Orioles coming out to the West Coast for a week here to take on the A's and the Giants.
Well, you know what? I always think that the Orioles have a chance every year, partly because I think Buck Showalter is so great at his job, and gets the best out of his personnel. But they do have some wherewithal with their payroll to spend a little bit. Obviously, they showed that was this last off season. The question mark is usually pitching, and I think that's maybe where people are surprised a little bit. But they've got a lot of talent, and they usually do a nice job with their drafting and developing. It's I think Baltimore, a little bit like Toronto, sometimes their problem is just being in the wrong division.
How often do you see the Giants play? I mean, I know you've been with the A's and you're identified with the A's and all that, but do you ever get over and watch it would be a lot more beneficial to watch the Giants play right now than the A's over the next 60 days, I guess, right?
Well, I see them during interleague, and otherwise, I cover the A's full time.
And that's that, right? I mean, does it even feel like the Giants are there? I mean, I guess at this point, with empty stadiums on your side of the fence, and the Orioles fans coming out to see Oakland on Wednesday and Thursday, and maybe sliding over to a Giants game, it's a whole different world on the other side of the Bay right now, and they've got their hands full with the Dodgers on the come too.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very good team. They've got a beautiful ballpark. There's certainly a ton of success over the last few years. So, things are very good on that side.
I think in the American League West, what we've seen the Rangers do, and even at the trading deadline, as well as the Astros with their young players, it really feels like the A's have, a longer way to go than next spring training to believe in hope again.
Well, the A's are in this weird kind of, I don't know, it's a dilemma, I think. The front office is very competitive. The ownership also is a little bit on the competitive side, and there have been times over the last couple of years where they've said, we're going to do a full rebuild. And they start a rebuild, and then they go, you know what, maybe we'll just try to go for it a little bit. And they start adding some pieces to try to contend that year. And they wind up never quite finishing bad enough to get a real high draft pick. So this last year they had number 6, which is their highest since Mark Mulder. So
wow.
A very long time. And they just, they just can't bring themselves to really be bad for the extended stretch where they would get, 2, 3, 4 number 1s, 2s, 3s in the draft. And there tends to be a pretty big difference. I mean, those number 1s and 2s are generally really special players. And, the payroll hamstrings them a little bit. So, yeah, they try to mix and match with a little bit of drafting and developing and adding some lesser pieces here and there. It's tough. That's one of the reasons that they had their recent 3-year run was they were able to sign Yoenis Cespedes kind of out of nowhere at the last second just because he didn't want to do a 6-year deal with the team. He wanted 4, and the A's jumped in and said, hey, we could do a 4-year deal. Those are the kind of players they don't get ever, and I think that might have been what put them over the edge a little bit those 3 years. And I don't see the ability for them to do something like that coming up on the horizon.
You mentioned, 2 or 3 bad years. Well, they're already at the end of the second sort of kind of bad year. And what a bad time to be there. I mean, we talked about the Giants and where they've been and their their World Series parades and all that. But you got San Jose down south in the Stanley Cup Finals. Obviously, in the same parking lot there, they're competing with, the gorilla in the room at this point with the Warriors and Durant and all the success Steph Curry's had there. It's sort of easy to fall to sort of the bottom of the whole Bay Area pecking order pretty quickly. And, the A's remain vibrant despite not having a lot of money. It's got to be a little worrisome next couple of years when it comes to, ticket sales, suites, sponsorship, all those type of things, and especially playing in a challenge facility. But by the way, I love that challenge facility. Every time I sit in there, I feel like I'm at the old Memorial Stadium. So it's the last place I can go and feel a little dirty piece of my childhood, the Oakland Coliseum.
Yeah, I don't think that their attendance has always been kind of an issue, and that they've never been a team that's been at the forefront of making money in the Bay Area. They're actually probably the best sports entertainment value among the pro sports teams in the Bay Area for sure. I think their concern is the upcoming CBA. Right now they're getting revenue sharing, which keeps them afloat because their attendance is poor. And if at some point they lose the revenue sharing based on the fact they are in a top 5 market, they will be in trouble. That's what they're looking at. That would be massive trouble, because if you combine low attendance and a very poor media deal with no revenue sharing, I don't know what they do. Then you might be looking at a long run of number 1 and 2 draft picks for sure.
Hey, would long-term staying there, I keep hearing they're waiting for the NFL to let the Raiders go to Vegas or whatever, and at some point, some divine intervention will happen and the A's will get their own ballpark. What does your crystal ball say over the next 10 years?
There's absolutely the practical thing to do is to wait for the Raiders. I know Commissioner Manfred said that's completely not related, and they're looking for a ballpark without considering the Raiders. First of all, there's no other obvious site in the Oakland area. The Coliseum site is the best site for a new ballpark.
It's certainly not one on the BART, right? I mean, if we're talking about public transportation.
Yeah, any other place would require tons of infrastructure and lots of cleanup and, some right-of-way, eminent domain kind of action. I mean, there are too many complications and nothing really obvious. So, yeah, they're waiting on the Raiders, and certainly the Raiders have made enough noises about leaving that it's entirely imaginable that that's what will happen. And if it doesn't, then that's easy. That's an absolutely easy fix. Then you just tear down the Coliseum and you put up a new ballpark.
Susan, I'm going to be up late every night brewing some coffee here, as will everybody out on the East Coast watching the A's and the Orioles. We hope you stay awake for it all. I'm going to try to figure out each and every one of these bobbleheads on your Twitter page. So, I've got the obvious, the Ricky and the the Raleigh finger. Those are kind of obvious, but I'm going to do a little Google search on some of these other numbers and faces and try to figure it out.
All right, sounds good.
Hey, great having you on. Appreciate it.
All right.
There she goes, Susan Slusser, San Francisco Chronicle A's beat writer since 1999. She's also at the Major League Baseball Network as a correspondent. You can follow her journey out at Susan Slusser on Twitter with a wonderful collection of A's bobbleheads. My favorite uni, of course, is the gold uni. Anything that has to do with Charlie Finley at this point. I hated him in 1973. Yeah, later on, I'm all for orange baseballs and selling off Joe Rudy. sfgate.com is also the way to find her out at the San Francisco Chronicle. You can find me in the Bahia Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We come in crystal clear. And, of course, Nasty at WNST.net reaches me. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Snapchat. I've got all that going on. And we put it all together in the morning newspaper that comes to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning, and that is powered up by our friends at Planet Fitness, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. If there's any breaking news from Ravens camp on those backfields before Thursday, if there's anything going on the West Coast with the Orioles and moving rosters, you'll get it first on the WNST text service. That is our breaking news service. It is the best thing we do. That's why about 10,000 of you are on it. Sign up. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard, and Dennis will be here on Thursday driving you home. I'm Nestor. This is WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.